And welcome back to the Short Time Wrestling Podcast. Big event coming up. Actually, big events coming up. Final X is coming to Stillwater the first weekend of June. And then Final X is coming to New York City. Right to the Hulu Theater on June the 8th, a Wednesday. Today, going to talk with us a little bit. I'm going to talk some things about Beat the Streets New York City. Is Brendan Buckley, the executive director of Beat the Streets New York City, former head coach at Cal Poly and Columbia, and an interesting circuitous route of your wrestling career. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But Brendan, welcome back to the show. Been a while since we chatted.
That's right. Thanks a lot, Jason. Appreciate you having me on, as well as working our event and being our announcer this on the 8th.
Yeah, be working with my partner in crime, Brian Hazard. Actually, I did some looking at the calendar. I haven't been to a Beat the Streets event since 2012 when Henry Cejudo was wrestling in the middle of times. That was the last time I was there because
that's time ago.
Yeah, the first one I missed because I was on my honeymoon, the one that was on a boat. And then, hit a couple of them doing the TV. And then once I left USA Wrestling, it was just like, man, I can't get to New York anymore.
Well, good man, not missing your honeymoon.
A couple things, too, is it's fallen on my anniversary a couple times. And I've tried to talk the wife into coming to New York on it. It's our anniversary. She's like, it's a wrestling tournament. But actually this year, we're actually making that happen. So after I get done on that Thursday, I'm going to stick around. And then my wife and my kids are coming because we were supposed to see The Lion King on Broadway 2 years ago. And you realize what happened 2 years ago. So we're finally getting that Lion King New York and bringing the girls to the big city trip. So this time the wrestling Beat the Streets trip actually pays off for me, and I'm stoked for it.
I love it.
Now, with your background, I mean, you're a New Yorker, then you end up in Florida, then you end up in South Carolina, California. You've had a circuitous route. You've been a head coach a couple different places. And I guess, how would you describe your wrestling journey through this point right now?
It's just always just keeping me on my toes. So grateful. You're 18 years old, you have wanderlust, and you're trying to figure out what you want to do, where you want to live. And I mean, at that point, I was excited to have a college program that wanted me. My brother wrestled at Clemson, my brother Greg. And so I loved Clemson. When Clemson dropped, I was just my stomach dropped. I just grew up with it and loved that place. But that began this journey towards just chasing opportunities. And I tell people all the time, whether it's wrestling or something else, you're passionate about something, you believe in it and you love it. And, you treat people well and you just try and take advantage of opportunities, good things. Life has a way of opening doors for you. And so when one door was shut at Clemson, another one opened up in California and at Fresno State. And from there, I had an opportunity at UC Davis up in another part of the state of California that I really liked a lot. It was, and some of my friends too, at the end of the day, the relationships, the people that you meet from participating in this sport, whether as an athlete or a coach. I just couldn't even have written the script any differently. And then going to Virginia, Columbia, back to California, and now again here in New Jersey, I'm just nothing but grateful for all the gifts the sport has given me.
Yeah, what's interesting is, and this is probably a painful interesting, is some people, when you talked about Clemson dropping, and you sadly have the experience of losing your programs 3 times because we've had Clemson drop and Fresno has dropped twice. And, how does that wear on you as an alum in this sport, which, we want to grow, but also we also have to realize there's a niche element to it, and we have to grow within ourselves before we can grow beyond. But how does that wear on you sometimes? Be like, man, I can't send my kids to where I went to school.
Yeah, it took me a really long time and I'm not fully over it, but to get over Clemson dropping. It's just so unfair to the student athletes, and there was a lot of my teammates who just weren't in a position to pick up and go to another school. That's whatever. They were redshirting, or they didn't sort of have an opportunity to prove themselves and get recruited elsewhere. So, you're left in a quandary. You either stay here where you've kind of planted roots and you're totally you continue to live the lifestyle and at the school that you chose and within your chosen major. I mean, if I would have, when I transferred, if I would have stuck with business, I already lost a full semester, like 6, 7 classes. So, you have to stay eligible. And it's just, man, it was hard. It was really hard. And then I had a pretty challenging first year too, which, made things even more challenging. But, in the end, it just stinks, now to see what happened with Fresno State, not once, but twice. UC Davis, I mean, that program was on the rise, and just another casualty in the state of California. So it's just so difficult. It's just hard to swallow. And then you realize, like how many, I mean, it's like how many opportunities are there remaining, and it's just difficult. But again, I was fortunate. I mean, things worked out for myself, but for a lot of people, that wasn't the case.
Now, one thing that the last thing I guess we'll get on the Clemson thing is when you look at the landscape of college wrestling now. We look at granted the arms race wasn't what it was then, but it is now, and you look and be like, the ACC really is thriving in wrestling. Save Duke with the non-scholarship situation there, but I mean, I guess we all believe that if a Power Five started a wrestling program, they could be pretty successful pretty quickly. From your experience there, what you know about coaching at the college level, I mean, how quickly do you think a school like Clemson could be if they brought wrestling back?
Oh, I think it would happen quick. And Clemson is just such a uniquely positioned school and location. I went to the ACCs this year, and it was lights out. Every match is going to be competitive there. There's no weak bouts. All of the teams. I mean, the teams race. You could finish towards the bottom and yet still qualify. 8+ people. It's pretty remarkable. And so, yeah, I mean, I think, I go down. We have a wrestling reunion that I try to go to almost every year. I go at least every other year, and you see the impact of like their football program, and yeah, and you could also comment on some of the negative aspects of that and its impact on a sport like wrestling. But that campus there is flush with resources, and it's very attractive now, and the academic prestige has just continued to climb. Just beautiful, idyllic setting, like so many of the other ACC schools in that part of the country. Beautiful athletic facilities, couple hours from Atlanta, and just when I was there were tons of people from New Jersey. There's still, like, when you're from the Northeast, the idea of going to school at a campus like that is very appealing. So being able to recruit in this part of the country, as was the case when I was there, we had, there was New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania, Ohio. We had a run of Oklahoma guys, and I mean that program for being around, I think it was 19 years. It might have been. I think it was 19 years. Maybe it was 29. I don't even think it was. I think it was closer to 19 years, and there had been a pretty significant high number of All-Americans at that time. And that was just a different era. I mean, North Carolina was really strong at that time, but the conference is at a different level right now.
You had said that when one door closes, another door opens. Moving out to Fresno State, had an opportunity to put you in touch with one of your now lifelong friends, Yaru Washington. What's that relationship like? He's working with Beat the Streets LA, and he's been on your staff. I mean, that's something that you guys were connected at the hip for quite a while.
Oh yeah, and it's really surreal and cool. I get chills thinking about it, is when we were teammates in the midst of mauling one another every single day in practice. We always talked about, like, one day we're gonna start a business together. We're gonna work together. We clearly had no idea, didn't have any inkling that could be in wrestling. But I think when we were having that conversation, we didn't rule anything out. So when he joined my staff at Columbia, it was, I mean, I'll never forget it. Like, he was working in pharmaceutical sales, and our program, we were starting to win. We had a top 10 recruiting class. Matt Palmer had just committed to, Dave Esposito had committed to be on the coaching staff. So there was a lot of momentum and positive things happening, and we were starting to win. And he's just like, yeah, he called me and he's just like, I want out. So he took a job as a volunteer slash club coach. I mean, I think I had $7,000 for him. So, only a real friend would put him in a position like that, like myself. But he jumped at the opportunity in time. He officially became, a better, more full time position on the staff, and we had some great success and had some great times. And then he went to Iowa State. I ended up going to Cal Poly. And so when I was at Cal Poly and I went to the Beat the Streets Los Angeles annual benefit, who their chairman of the board and their founder is Andy Barth, who is a Columbia guy. And I remember being at that benefit and just thinking like, wow, this is really cool what he's doing. This is very impactful. And it was just a fun and exciting event. And I'm like, man, this would be something cool to do one day. So a couple of years later, I was getting ready to transition, and growing up on the East Coast, San Luis Obispo was one of the most beautiful places ever. But the idea of my parents, getting older and my family all on this side of the country, it just became more appealing for me to come back to the East Coast. And I found out about the New York. I wasn't aware, but Yaru would share with me there was an opening in LA. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is like kind of perfect. This is what I'm looking for. And so be it. About a year later, I found myself back in New York. My wife, we, obviously joined me. And I've been a little bit more than 6 years here at Beat the Streets, and it's really, really been a special experience.
Now, one thing when you get into coaching, it seems like, when wrestling career is over, you've hit the podium, the next logical thing, all right, coaching. You spend, almost 2 decades, if not more, coaching. And then at some point you're like, all right, I'm making a shift. What do you think the lifespan is of a Division I coach these years? Because I'm looking back at like Zeke Jones didn't become a head coach again at Arizona State until 47. He had one job at Penn before the Olympic Training Center. And then you look at guys like Bucky Mon, who coached almost 50 years. Don Murray out of Brockport did coach 50 years. So you're not seeing those guys as much anymore. You're seeing maybe 10, 12 years, and then they're getting out into something else. So, I mean, as far as what is now the blueprint model for somebody that wants to coach and then get into business, I mean, you got out young enough to still have another career. So, I mean, what do you think from your experience is kind of that lifespan of a D1 head coach?
Yeah, I mean, I did it for 19. I was an assistant for 3 and a head coach for 16. And at that time, I mean, I got married a little bit later. I didn't have children until after I left coaching, which is kind of interesting because part of me is like, I think it would have been cool to have a kid around at like college matches and such. I bring my son to events now at Beat the Streets, but I mean, clearly people do it. They have children, they have families. I think the ones that are successful, it just everybody needs to really. It's not a scenario where it's okay. My wife has her job and I have my job, and then we come together. I really think for the relationship and the dynamic of the family to make sense, it often is the case where the college coaches, right, is everybody kind of buys into that lifestyle. I don't think that's the case everywhere, but that seems to be my sense. And it is. It's all encompassing. It's not so much the tacit. I'm doing recruiting calls at this time, or I am at a practice at this time, whether it's the morning or the evening, or I'm at a competition. But it's that constant swirling in your head of things that you have to be doing, and knowing that you could get a call and you have to put out that fire, and that takes priority, which is like why coaching is just such a rewarding experience, is just being full into anything. That's when you get you get great results, and you have to be 100% in. But I think sometimes that can come at a toll after X number of years or decades. So I felt like that was, I don't think when I got into coaching, it wasn't for me personally an experience where I knew right away I'm going to be a coach. That's what I'm going to do. I knew I would enjoy doing it, but I wasn't like a lot of coaches where you just knew their grandfather coached and their uncle coached and their father coached, and So my experience was a little bit different. And again, part of the reason I felt so grateful is that even in light of that, I was still finding opportunities and I was just running with it. But yeah, it's intense. I mean, the mornings, the evenings, the constantly having to think about it. And, you're choosing, if you have a family, you got a couple families, you have your wrestling team and you have your family at home. And so I think that's where the challenge becomes is obviously your family at home needs to be the most important, but when you're in the throes of it, and trying to be, trying to be supportive of your student athletes and being obligated to them, it puts a lot on people's plates.
Looking at your path of where you've been, been at the University of Virginia, Cal Poly, Columbia, all with very high, reputable academic profiles. And when we look at your tenure at Columbia, I believe when you were coaching there when they got ranked for the first time, because I'm pretty sure I was doing the rankings. I was doing the research. Like, wait, this is the first time they've been ranked in the top 25. I think that was on your watch.
I remember
And
with you about it.
yeah, I was just like, couldn't remember. I was like, was that when he was at Cal Poly? Was that when? But the academic makeup, because the athletes go there. Yeah, wrestling is a big part of why they go there, but ultimately it's that degree. Now, when you're a head coach in a situation in a sport where so few of us actually win anything, it's like, yeah, hitting that podium. Well, looking at that podium, 4 guys are winning their last match, 4 guys are losing, and then you've only got one team champion. You get, okay, 4, your battle for a trophy. Okay, second, third, and fourth, you don't win. There's not a dual meet championship. So when you're coaching in the landscape that is college wrestling, where again winning is based on what the context of your institution is, where does that kind of wear on you? Where does that kind of drive you? It's like, okay, I know I can do this at Columbia. I know I can do this at Cal Poly. And, and then that's not necessarily the goals at a Penn State or an Oklahoma State. So how do you basically kind of quantify what's winning or what's success at those type of programs?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I learned early on when I was at Columbia, you just simply have to make it work. There's no sliding people in the back door. I just think you have to go out as you would anything else. We're going to try and win to the best of our ability here. Yeah, we had to be flexible. That didn't mean like sacrificing our principles or anything like that, but simply like there might be times where a student athlete is going to have to miss practice to prepare for a final, or say there's a class where we're going to have to find an alternative time for that student athlete to train, and you just make that work. And so it is hard. I mean, there are times where you could find yourself becoming frustrated, but it's also so largely, you hope that they're coming because they want both. They want to get a world-class education, and they also want to try and become an All-American and take their wrestling experience serious. But I think you couldn't help but be reminded when you walk around that campus, like, you're an elite company. I mean, you look at the list of alumni that are graduating from schools like Columbia and the other Ivies, and even Cal Poly, lots of prestigious schools. And you got to realize, like, this is something really serious. You can't. It's not a wrestling only experience, and then you're also graduating from a good school. They're going to be pursuing it, and they're in a competitive classroom, and that's something that admissions always tried to convey to us is, look, you have your team. You have competitive. The student athletes have competitive peers. You're trying to win. Our professors are trying to win. They're trying to do world-class research. They're trying to have their students graduate at the top of their class and get incredible job opportunities. So just like they're an elite company on your team and with their teammates, it's the same thing when they get into the classroom. It's incredibly competitive. I mean, there's people there that are, some of them who are some of the students, like, they're going in like they're going to get the best grade in class with beyond a shadow of a doubt, just like someone we may bring to a tournament is going to win the tournament beyond a shadow of a doubt. So it's just a matter of, that's where it comes through the recruiting process. You can't surprise them. Just full transparency. Here's what it's like when you get here. It's not easy. It's not for everybody. But if you do the right things and you take your classwork serious and you take your training and your approach to the sport, there's no reason you can't be successful in both.
You talked about professors. Were you aware that you weren't the only Brendan Buckley on campus at Columbia at one time?
Oh yeah, I think there was a football player.
There's also a Brendan Buckley, a biologist from the Lamont Doherty Earth Observatory.
I got a
That's
I've got a great story about that.
I want
So
to hear it.
okay, so I grew up in Florida. Solomon Fleckman, who was an assistant coach at the Blair Academy, also from Florida. And so his dad was a referee, and I remember when I was in high school, he was always very supportive of me and encouraging me to, I could be as successful as I wanted at the college level, and just really looked up to him. He was a great dude, and so fast forward to, oh, jeez, I'm going to take a stab. Maybe like 2008 or so. I get a letter from him, and I was like, "Oh, cool! I see this. Fleckman, Orlando, Florida. I remember Ira." And he goes on. I think I was copied on like a carbon copy letter, and he sent it to, or maybe it was an email, but it was. I definitely got a letter, and maybe it was a printout of like the email to a bunch of people, and it was complimenting me on my ability to both be a head coach and this world class researcher.
Oh wow.
And so I never had the heart to tell him, not because like my ego was overinflated, because clearly I wouldn't be fooling anybody with that kind of an academic accomplishment. But when I told Solomon, he and I had a good laugh about it. It was great. And so I just said, man, I got to meet this Brendan Buckley someday.
Well, he's still at Columbia, from what I understand. Have you had a chance to run into him yet?
No.
Yeah, I think I looked at his LinkedIn profile. University of Tasmania. Don't think they have a wrestling program. Now, when we move to what we're talking about today, Beat the Streets, and what your role is with the executive director, how does coaching college wrestling prepare you for a position like you have? Because this is it's an atypical business that you're working in, but a lot of it is the traditional business models and stuff. I mean, you've got you've got a board, you've got all sorts of benchmarks to hit and things of that nature. So how does the work-life balance of a real job in wrestling with it's not a job where you get beat up by kids all the time, but you're working with kids and you're in the business world here?
Yeah, I mean, I would start by saying it was definitely a learning curve, coming in without experience or really a whole lot of knowledge or expertise specific to the nonprofit industry. But there is definitely a lot of carryover. I really equate my experience at Columbia to just providing me with an incredible amount of just the experience there, just provided me with a lot of skills to take with me elsewhere. I mean, the people I was surrounding myself with, and at that time when I arrived, the program it had certainly individuals, with that were succeeding, but in terms of the EIWA, we were definitely struggling there. And so it took a lot of work to figure out, okay, how do we win here? What does that look like? And clearly admissions was an incredible part of that. And recruiting is part of that process. Learning about the financial aid process. And then, the big part that I think I certainly take away was just learning how to communicate, cast a vision, with the people that have the influence and the ability to help you succeed. And so at Columbia, that was our alumni network, or that was like senior leadership within the department or on campus. So building relationship with admissions was huge. Building relationship with my AD was huge. The financial aid office, and student support services. If kids ever needed something, they were struggling academically or emotionally or mentally, like who are the people to go to? But I think I sorry, it was the experience of fundraising. I really, as an assistant, didn't have that experience, but I learned early on how vitally important that was going to be, and fortunately was around some really supportive alumni that taught me, and just through just learning from them, that experience, how crucial that would be. And so pulling from that, talking to people about our vision, getting over this hump of how difficult it is to ask somebody for money, and sort of like flipping the script a little bit. Instead of saying, oh, well, I have to ask them for money, it's more like, well, this is this opportunity for our program to make a jump, for us to get to the next level. And this is somebody who's willing to help. And it just kind of helped me get over that. And that's certainly something that I carry with me. And then, in my role beyond fundraising, working with the board, which is sort of like, a little bit more intense and more follow up and data and things like that. But working with the board at Beat the Streets would be similar to sort of sharing my observations of the program and maybe what else was going on in the Ivy League or the EIWA at that time with our alumni group. And then managing people, that part, as a coach, I only had a few people. Now our staff is approximately 10. So that was definitely a learning curve. And then just working with student athletes in communities that don't have a lot of the resources that I had and many other people have growing up. Really being able to go see our coaches and our student athletes and meet them where they are, and really getting a sense of, wow, this work that we're doing is really important. And here's why. And then sharing that information and helping formulate goals and getting the board to buy into that. And then as far as the benefit, I mean, I've certainly learned a lot in that realm too. And in 6 years, I've learned a tremendous amount.
Now, the evolution of Beat the Streets, I mean, for so many years, the very flamboyant and socially prolific Mike Novogratz was kind of like the face of Beat. Everybody thought, oh, it's all Novo, it's all Novo, it's all Novo. How has the organization kind of grown and evolved from, it's like, there's a lot more people involved than Mike. Of course, he's been the guy that was really front and center and drawing attention to it. But, I mean, there's a lot of growth that's happened since, he kind of burst on the scene and said, hey, Beat the Streets is here. So, what's that day-to-day like with the office and the staff and things that have grown since Beat the Streets first came on everybody's radar?
Yeah, I recall when I was coaching at Columbia hearing about Beat the Streets starting, and I certainly wasn't aware, but I don't really think anybody was aware just how much growth would take place, whether it was adding new programs, individual programs, or also expanding the program model, growing the board, growing the budget. Even Mike's influence when he first got there, I think he just wanted to help out a local wrestling program. They bought him a mat and bought him some uniforms, and sort of reflecting on that to then fast forward to where we are today. And back then there were 25 programs. Now there are 150. So, I mean, do the math there. Now we have about 2,500 plus student athletes that we work with. We have a middle school league. We have a training center. We have a really like positive youth development focused program that helps student athletes off the mat as well as on the mat. We bring kids to camps and competitions and clinics. We have coaches education. So yeah, I mean, first off, I would just say though that we wouldn't be here without Mike. I mean, his vision of growing and just the idea of this annual benefit, as intense as it is, we just wouldn't have been able to get the recognition and notoriety, expanding into more schools, strengthening our partnership with New York City's Athletic Association, the PSAL, or USA Wrestling. I mean, look, we get to host the World Team Trials now, and our student athletes get to see some of their idols compete in a world famous place like Madison Square Garden and the Hulu Theater. We've been very successful as a result of Mike's connections and prominence in the financial sector, being able to tie banking into our operations. But a lot of that too, though, is just where our people that like wrestling alumni, whether they came from an Ivy League school or not, there's a certain tie to the personality does well in finance. And so as a result, being in New York City, around, in the Northeast where you have the Ivies and you have Lehigh and you have Rutgers and you have, even NYU and Hunter in the city and Stevens, you have all these, it's just this wrestling nucleus where so many people largely many wrestlers want to live and work in New York City. And if they are, it's tailor-made. There is a wrestling organization waiting for you. And so that has been huge. But as far as like where we are today, I mean, I think it was when Mike stepped off the board, he was chair for 13 years, I believe. And the other person who was vitally important to that was Al Bevilacqua, who was really pitched Mike on the idea. It really kind of began to save the sport of wrestling. I mean, this was not long after when the debacle with the Olympics was taking place and wrestling was considering to be eliminated. And so the idea was, well, wrestling is strong in these rural parts of the country. How are we really going to move the needle and grow immensely? And so it just made sense to do so in the cities, even though historically that's not where wrestling is taking place. So Al and Mike and that vision, the benefit, partnering with USA Wrestling and the PSAL. Mike was chair for 13 years, and then when he stepped down, then it was like, okay, we have to prove ourselves here. So he's still very supportive of the organization. Now Ray Barzak has been our chair. I think this will be 4 years now. So I think everybody at Beat the Street should be proud that we've been able to pivot. And when Mike stepped down was in 2018, when it was at the South Street Seaport. Following that, our next year, we had our best event in terms of numbers. We sold out the Hulu Theater. I mean, when people find out, just to get a sense of how unique this is, most nonprofits do not run events like this. Mm-hmm. They will run a party that will raise money, and it's usually more a cocktail hour, a dinner, a speaker, an auctioneer, and that's their benefit. Like, people aren't going to Madison Square Garden to try and sell 5,000 plus seats. So that being said, though, that's why Mike has a bold vision, and we've been able to benefit from that. But in 2019, when we sold out the theater, that was a big deal for us, and I think it was also kind of proving like, hey, we have a board, we've got a vision, we've got the right program model, that we can do this moving forward. So now we're 2 weeks away from our next benefit, and it's a big, fast moving operation, but we're really excited.
Yeah, I remember going into the Bowery for the first one. This is even before there was actually wrestling. And I remember, driving in from Lancaster, Pennsylvania, trying to find a place to park. And it was like my first time ever driving into the city as an adult. And I'm like, okay, how the heck does anybody navigate this with the car? Parked, went over. It's like I think I had $20 in my pocket. And I'm like, all right, well, I know New York City prices are a little bit high. Let me get some. I'll just have a Jack and Coke. That'll be $20. I'm like, okay, I guess that pretty much limits the intake I have before I drive back a couple hours later. But then we went to the boat. Then we went to Duffy Park, Times Square. Then we went to the train station. There's so many different iconic venues that we've been to. And then to talk about Al, who to hear Al talk, you need about a day and a half to hear his pitch, because Al is a consummate advocate for the sport of wrestling and has been basically back in the day. It's like, okay, we need time to fill. Let's put Al on a microphone. There's 45 minutes right there. So, and I just remember some of Al's points back in the day about pitching Beat the Streets was, Brooklyn, I think he said, was be the fifth largest city in the country if it was its own city, but it's part of New York City as one of the 5 boroughs. And then you look at the activity. He used the word activity. He's an educator. He wasn't just known for his cameo in Seinfeld or coaching at Hofstra, but he talks about keeping kids busy, activities. There's a lot of things kids can get into in a city as big as New York City. To me, it's mind-blowing. Coming from a small, area, in a large metro area without mass transit in Hampton Roads, Virginia, and living out here in the Midwest. And okay, mass transit's a thing, but kids don't take subways and city buses to go to school where I'm from. This is normal in New York City. Yeah. So the opportunities to give them a sporting activity where there's not a whole lot of green space. The green space a lot of these kids see, if they happen to live in Manhattan, is Central Park, and there's green spaces here and there, but for the most part, I drive 10 minutes outside of where I live, and I can see acres and acres of stuff to do. You grow up in a city like New York, you don't really have that option. So the opportunity to provide activities for kids is a big part of this mission. So I guess we can talk about the mission to beat the streets, where it is from the grassroots to kids level, and how it funnels into putting on these big events that brings in the Jordan Burroughses of the world. So all of those things are related, but you got to figure out how do you relate them, and how does Beat the Streets relate them together?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that when we first began, there was like, it seemed a little bit of a disconnect between what our event was, really the purpose it was serving, and the operations of Beat the Streets. And I think that's just because we were new and people weren't really aware, right? And so I think we had to educate people, donors in the wrestling community. Like, we are running this event. This is a platform to raise funds to help us impact student athletes, for us to be in those 150 programs in all the communities in all the 5 boroughs in New York City. This is for us to have a staff to be able to work with those student athletes. This is for us to pay our coaches, these coaches who are coaching middle school programs a few days a week. This event will help us send kids. These kids in the PSAL, they're not flying to Ironman, like taking a bus and getting a hotel to Ironman for most of them, or flying out to the any of these host of other tournaments and competitions. Their school budgets are, for most of them, like under $100, and so that
doesn't go very far in New York City either.
No, so and that's not a joke. I mean, that's, they have very, very little resources. And so that's where Beat the Streets comes in. And our mission is to help them achieve success on the mat and in the class, and in their, reaching their full potential. But it's also to strengthen New York City's wrestling culture. And so that is one thing that I know we're all proud of, is that there was a time when the New York City section in Section 12 would go to the New York State tournament and just would be getting throttled. Weren't placing individuals in their respective weight classes getting on the state podium in Albany each February. And so the culture has been strengthened. Coaches have opportunities. We provide resources. We partner with these high school coaches. We run our own middle school league. It's like, again, if you want to wrestle in New York City, there's only one place to do it. You could conceivably wrestle on your team and not take advantage of all the opportunities Beat the Streets provides, but it would be foolish. From feeding them, to taking them to camps and clinics, to taking them on college visits, to doing workshops and seminars on academic success and college planning, educating them on how to set goals and what is a growth mindset and how do you deal with failure, and then just simply to just be there when they need support. I mean, there are some student athletes who are facing some pretty challenging circumstances, and for a lot of them, they may not take advantage of an opportunity that's just generally presented to them. But if it's through the sport of wrestling, or it's from the wrestling organization, they're seeing those coaches, they have a rapport with them, then you're more likely to strike a chord with them and to get them to come along on this ride for us. And when we meet parents and we meet administrators, we meet donors, it's a no-brainer. I mean, we're an organization that's doing a ton of education simply through the sport of wrestling. Nothing simple about that, but in the wrestling practice room and in competition. But we're also providing a lot of these skills that they're not getting in terms of planning for college, and interpersonal skills, and a lot of these things that so many people may take for granted, or they're just never exposed to.
A couple things I want to get to before we get to the actual event that's coming up at the Hulu Theater, and that's the staff. Of course, we could take a whole show talking about the individual aspects of each member of Beat the Streets New York City. But a couple names that I want to jump out. Well, Penn Gottfried is a name that people may know recently from the college mats. He wrestled at Columbia. He's part of the staff there. Of course, Barry Hart coaches at NJCU, the new men's and women's program down there in Jersey City. He's the boys coach. And then Becca Leather's a name people will know as a world bronze medalist. She's the girls coach. And let's talk about the dynamic of the coaches that you've got at Beat the Streets New York City, and then, of course, the office staff and how that synergy is.
Yeah, I mean, I just sent an email to my board this morning, just letting them know how our staff is just crushing it. It's like everybody else. It's been a couple of very challenging years, especially when you're a wrestling organization. We vacated our office back in July of 2020, and we were shut down. We were running workouts over Zoom, doing different leadership classes through and life skill workshops through our academy program. And so it was really hard and trying to make, we lost kids as a result. We had some kids that were, maybe juniors at that time that didn't get to continue on with the sport of wrestling. And so to have a staff that's just fully committed, demonstrate, resolve, it just comes from this belief that what we're doing is working. And so Penn, Barry, Becca, in the programming front are the ones that are really working closest with the kids. But John Rollins, our operations and finance, and Carrie Doyle running our fundraising, and Brandon Kane doing our communications. We have these AmeriCorps positions. We have a guy, Koo, who's also helping out with programming. One of our alumni, Jess, is one of our coaches. Everybody's on the same page, having alumni like Barry and Jess to really help us and help us make decisions coming from the perspective of student athletes is really important. So I can't stress enough how lucky I am to have such a strong team like that.
And it's pretty cool to see the people that have come and gone, and not negatively as far as gone, but the people that have passed through Beat the Streets, whether they're there in New York City for, maybe they may be a GA at a school in town, or they've got a job there and they're helping out, and then they've gone on to do other things. There's a long list of alumni that have been helping out, or that are coaches that have gone on around the country and around the world that have stepped foot through those Beat the Streets wrestling rooms. So that right there also is pretty impressive.
Absolutely. Yeah, we just had a career day last Thursday, and we had a third of our board was there. We had our student athletes get dressed up, and some of them came with a resume. We had them kind of prepare like some questions to show up and do, explain to them what an elevator pitch is. And it was just, you had board members coming up to us. They're like, man, they're just such good kids. This was really impactful. Like, so then you have people who are coming too that are leaving, having benefited just like our student athletes. So yeah, we do some really we create a lot of special opportunities like that in our programs.
One thing I personally loved is I made a contribution a couple years ago, and I've made some contributions off and on depending on my own financial situations. But one of the things you guys did was I got a letter in the mail from a high school athlete. It was a handwritten thank you note, and it was on notebook paper. It was and I understand this was an exercise that was done to thank the donors, but this was like one of those, like, it was a sincere thank you, and it was like, you don't see kids writing handwritten anything these days. I mean, I look at my own kids, I'm like, was their handwriting going to get any better anytime soon? But I mean, it's just one of those things that, like, writing a letter, like you talked about getting a letter from Ira, like just simple knowing how to write a letter, like handwritten thank you notes in the business world go a long way with the people that own these businesses, and thank you notes, for example, go a long way, in letters. And this was something that I thought that's a life skill that are the schools even teaching this these days? And that's something you guys did with these high school and middle school kids. Like, I still got that letter. It's I've got a folder of things that I keep, and it's right there underneath the bar. If you're watching, I've got a folder of keepsakes and stuff, and that letter is in there. So, I don't know if the girl's actually wrestling anymore or not, but thing is that's something that resonated with me as somebody who gave $100 that particular year. And it's like, wow, that's something that, okay, just that basically that feedback, that was my return on investment, was knowing that there's another student athlete out there that came through the sport of wrestling that has a simple skill that is kind of overlooked these days. And I think, and that's something that, as somebody who contributed that year, that meant a lot to me to know you guys are doing something that's not just, okay, let's teach some single legs. Okay, go to class. That's huge.
Yeah, that's really good feedback to hear. We do that each summer. We try and do a session where we explain here's the difference between a nonprofit organization and a profit-making organization. Like we're not selling anything. There's no merchandise we're creating that we're selling online. So we explained how we're on the backs of our donors. So we need people to believe in what we're trying to do to help you, for us to have the resources that it takes to present these opportunities for you, and so you can thrive and succeed on and off the mat. So that's the idea and that's the intent. And so then we talked about, hey, when somebody does something for you, it's really important to thank them. And then we did a little bit of like, hey, here's what a simple letter looks like. Here's what an intro and a body and a conclusion is, and then talking about that same thing, to be the old guy in the room, explaining how, even though the vast majority of our communication is all done online, don't underestimate the power of the written word and take advantage of that.
And I'll even say that's something that I want to say it was Fred Kimsey, who was the ICT. I don't even know what ICT meant in high school, but he was the guy that worked a lot of the if you went to you were going to do a trade, or you went to the New Horizons, the tech center or something after school, you did most of your day in school. Well, Mr. Kimsey, I remember when I applied for the newspaper job in high school at the Daily Press, he goes, "Did you write him a note?" I go, "What?" He goes, "Write him a note saying thank you for the opportunity to, just simply apply." And that simple thing, and I did. I ended up getting the job. And of course, my career has gone that way since. And it's just something that people, that when they contribute to the Mat Talk Podcast Network, for example, when I send them their goodie bag of swag that they get with the Mat Talk stuff, kind of like what I'm wearing now, if you're watching a video, is a handwritten thank you note. I mean, yeah, there's the thank you, but I also handwrite it. My handwriting has gotten worse over the years, depending on which brackets I'm filling out. Because, round one, you fill in a bracket, it's pretty clean. By the time you fill out the semis, it's all scribbled. So, it's one of those things that's something that's resonated in my own career. A handwritten note is something I got taught early, and I still do to this day. So those are things that, they're okay boomer stuff to a lot of us. But, I mean, I'm 42. I don't think I'm a okay boomer yet, but it's like those things matter, man. Those things matter.
No, 100%.
Now, you talked about success on the mat. Are you ready to talk about the success on the mat that's going to come up on the 8th at the Hulu Theater?
Oh, man, I'm ready for it to be here.
Yeah, because we've talked enough about Brendan Buckley. Let's talk about the people on the screen here. Okay, so if you're watching on the video, we've got the lineup, 15 bouts. First session's going to start at 2 p.m. I'm also going to throw a ticket link up on the screen because there are some tickets still remaining. You go through Ticketmaster. It is. I've just done a quick bit.ly link, so bit.ly/finalxtix, TIX. That's how you can get your link to the Ticketmaster through Hulu Theater in New York. So right now, 5 of each style. We got 15 matches, best 2 out of 3. We got some powerful names in Greco, women, and men's freestyle. And of course, the money names are on this list. David Taylor, Jordan Burroughs, Helmer Rules, Kyle Dake. I mean, these are names, when people come to New York and they want to see wrestling, these are the names they've expected to see at the Beat the Streets Gala and the big event. And now we've got Final X, mashed into it. So, I mean, this is something you're like, yes. Yeah,
we're excited. Man, I mean, we've had an electric atmosphere, whether it's the Intrepid, Times Square, Grand Central, South Street Seaport, and then again here at Hulu. We've never had the World Team Trials, so I think it adds a whole nother element to it.
Actually, to interrupt, bro, I'm going to cut you off real quick. How did this materialize? That's what I want to know. How does Final X, World Team Trials, and the BTS event kind of come together as one this year?
So I reached out to Rich Bender and Bill Zadek and Cody Buckley. Every year when we have a benefit, those guys are great. We're trying to formulate matches and see see whether it's what time of the year is going to work or which athletes are going to be most likely to want to take a bid. And so the challenge, obviously in the last couple of years, well, we had to cancel in 2020. That was the Olympic year, and people don't want to, we didn't even try. Just didn't want to, it's just, and this is a challenge. It's always, the timing is always difficult. They have training regimens, and they have these qualifying tournaments that they need to hit internationally. And so for us, nonprofit season, generally speaking, is the spring. May is always a big month when in New York City, all of these nonprofits are having their annual benefits and fundraisers. And so that can be a challenge with the Pan Ams. Then there's Final X. And so we're talking about this. And then it seemed like, well, maybe we could look at July or August. And I'm like, man, we haven't had a benefit in 3 years. Like, we need the income. We need to have this kind of an event to make sure our operations are strong and solid. And so I just asked the question, like, what if we did Final X? And so I think Bill and kind of paused for a second and was like, well, maybe I don't know, maybe we could, I don't see why not. And we just kind of look, and then, but what happened is I looked at, 2 full days of wrestling. I was into it because, well, first of all, the prestige of it would be amazing, and having it here in New York City, doing it at Hulu Theater, which is hands down, I think, the best arena, 5,000, a little over 5,000 for the sport of wrestling. I knew what took place in 2019 when we sold it out. My only concern was doing 2 full days of wrestling, and then also having a benefit, like our after party that we run. And so like, well, what if we do like we did but USA Wrestling did in 2019, where you have 2 different sites. I'm like, I think that will work a little bit better for us. And so that's what we did. And so Oklahoma State was the other one, and USA Wrestling wasn't exactly sure who else was fully committed to it. I'm like, well, we're committed to it. Definitely put us down for a day. And then fortunately, shortly thereafter, talking with Rich, he got, John Smith was all about it. And they timed it with their, what do they call it? Their Hall
Honors
of Fame.
Weekend, Hall of Fame Honors Weekend. Yeah.
So, then we just worked at creating which weights Oklahoma State will get, which ones we'll get, where the returning medalists, where's their home base. And so we're so enthusiastic and excited for this opportunity before us here in 2 weeks.
Yeah, and I'm looking at how it's split. I mean, it's just like, yeah, there's some, I mean, the Oklahoma State tie-ins obviously down there, but man, just looking at the name, I mean, I'm really speechless. I mean, we saw some really good wrestling at the World Team Trials Challenge tournament this past weekend in Iowa, and I'm looking at some of the names, and I'm just like, man, this is who you want to see. If you're a wrestling fan, okay, whether it's Stillwater, whether it's New York, and we're talking about New York right here, but the opportunity, and let's talk about the facility for a second. So a couple years ago, when Dylan Wanagale was still with Madison Square Garden, brought me in to announce the Grapple the Garden, which that year was in Hulu Theater. So, the meeting would take place on Saturday. So I come in, and it's Kentucky and Monmouth playing basketball, and it gets me a seat. I'm 3 seats behind Calipari. So then, okay, we got that. Then we go to our meeting. They're doing the changeover for the Devils Rangers. So then we go to the Devils Rangers game that night. I haven't even really left the building yet. I think I went across the street to check into my hotel. And then once that game is over, we walk through a door. Next thing you know, we're in the Hulu Theater, and it's the Lomachenko fight. And it's like, and I saw Michael Buffer do Let's Get Ready to Rumble in person, which is an announcer, is like fanboy moment. But right. And there is, and I'm having worked in these facilities, I'll say this technologically, I don't think there's a better place on the planet to put this stuff with the tech and everything that's needed to put on a first-class event. I mean, the Hulu Theater, for those who are trying to figure out what we are talking about, okay, it's like the ESPY Awards. You see the theater has those crisscrossing lights, just kind of like the ceiling of Madison Square Garden has that familial fanned out look. Yeah. Well, it's the lights at the Hulu Theater that really is like, oh, that place. Yes, yeah. ESPY Awards, think of that. So from a facility standpoint, I'm stoked to work in probably technologically the best arena I've ever worked in and best facility I've ever worked in. So selfishly, that's going to be a plus for me. But then the sound carries in there. And even when we were there for the Grapple of the Garden the year, we had just the one featured matches, and sound carries very well. It's going to get, and I wasn't there in 2019, but I know it's going to get really loud in there. And it's, if there are tickets available, I'd suggest you get them quickly, because this will be a can't miss event.
Yeah, the sight lines in the arena, just the lights at the top, this it's like this gradual, it's not, I think it's pretty cool when you're in a pit and you're in a large, say even like Barclays Center that is massive, and you're kind of like on top of the arena. But this is like, it's got this gradual incline ascending up the arena, where even the seats in the very, very, very back, you still got a great view of the wrestling. There's a couple balconies that overlook the match, floor seating. And you're 100% right. MSG is MSG for a reason. They're total pros. They're tech team. We've done 2 walkthroughs. Flo came out. It's a pretty intense production. But man, when we get there day of, I'm like getting chills kind of thinking about it. And you see the athletes coming down, getting ready. Just all of the lighting, the announcing. One of my favorite parts is the Brooklyn Marching Band, who opens up the event for what is a very New York City urban, just kind of opening to the event. It's just, you're in New York, and for us to be able to host it, I hope the athletes are as excited as we are to be able to compete and perform in a city like New York, and in front of so many fans here in the Northeast that care about wrestling.
Just break down these matchups real quick. We're not going to go match by match. I'm just going to, for those of you that are not watching the video, as we got this on the premium side of things, but Greco, Kamal Bey, and Britton Holmes. We got Alan Vera and Tim Young. That's one of the last, he was on the last team at ODU, so Tim Young making an appearance, actually an Ellsworth Junior College national champ. Alex Sancho, Alston Nutter at 67, Dalton Roberts and Ildar Hafizov, and Giangelo Hancock and Braxton Amos, 2 of the more names familiar for Greco-Roman. On the women's side, Skylar Groten, Amit Elor, and Skylar's from Jersey, right across the river. You've also got, on the women's side, Felicity Taylor and Dom Parrish. Dom just won the Pan Ams. Kayla Miracle and Jennifer Rogers, that's formerly known as Jennifer Page. She's got married, and so she is Jennifer Rogers. You got Sarah Hildebrandt and Alyssa Lampe, and then Helen Maroulis and Alex Hedrick wrapping up the 5 women's matches. Those men's freestyle, you got Yanni and Evan Henderson, man, coming out of nowhere to earn a spot. Actually, he's been a known product, but had a really great tournament at the qualifier. Hayden Zilmer, who's been eating his Wheaties, and Nick Wisdowski. You've got, you keep going with Kyle Dake, Jason Nolf, Jordan Burroughs, Chance Marsteller, who's, just a personal success story for him, hitting pretty much close to rock bottom. Now he's going to wrestle arguably one of the greatest wrestlers in American history, if not world history, in Jordan Burroughs. And then David Taylor, Zaid Valencia. These are money matches. If you could take any one of these matches and put them on a card by themselves, it could sell out the Hulu Theater. But you get 15 of these, you get them at least twice, or you're getting 30 bouts. And so we can sell wrestling, is going to sell itself. But now the after party, the benefit, where can people that may not have access to it right now, how can they be a part of the post-match festivities and everything that goes around this Final X BTS weekend, or Wednesday, actually?
So the way it works is we sell our tickets. It's we call it a ticket package, and it comes with a ticket to the match. You get best access to the best seat. You get access to the best seats in the arena, and then it comes with access to the after party. So it takes place at a restaurant across the street from MSG called Versa NYC. All this information can be found right on our homepage, btsny.org. If you go there, you'll see front and center, you'll see the different tabs to find information out for the annual benefit. So the after party, it's not to be missed. It's participating athletes, their families, USA Wrestling, their coaching staff. It's a who's who. We've had UFC stars. Last year, Kelly Ripa and Mark Consuelos were there. It's really quite a spectacle. And it's just a celebration of New York City wrestling and the mission to beat the streets. We're working closely with Jeff Riccio, who's our digital designer. We have some posters. We're going to have the athletes sign for sale. We're going to have some cool raffle items, like a signed singlet for all the athletes. and it's just a great time. One thing I'd also push is for anyone that maybe they can't make the event, but they want to do something to support Beat the Streets, you can text Final X to 44321. It's Final X, text Final X to 44321, and you can make a donation of any size to support the event. Historically, we've raised over $1 million at this event, so we're hoping we can do the same thing again. Ticket sales are increasing as we get closer. I would definitely encourage people to get their ticket now so they don't miss out. It's obviously first come, first serve. And if you want to come check out the after party and learn a little bit more about Beat the Streets, rub elbows with prominent members of the wrestling community, then that's definitely the way to go.
Yeah, so let's touch base on that real quick, because I know that guys like Neil deGrasse Tyson have shown up at the event in the past. I know Mike Novogratz is friends with the guys from Big and Rich. I think John Rich, one year he's like, John Rich and the Ass Kickers out there. One of the last time I was there, and I saw Antonio Garay there. He was at the time playing for the Chargers. I mean, there you'll see. You know, you've mentioned Kelly Ripa and Marcus Wales, but like there's the wrestling celebs. Then there's the wrestling connected celebs that I also like. Okay, I'm not gonna fanboy out here at all. It's now the autograph is now the selfie. It's like I met Lou Ferrigno a couple months ago at the NAIC. I was like, sir, can I get a picture? And that was it. Okay, that's all you're gonna get from me. So those opportunities will also be there. So if was one year I think Matthew Modine shows up, and before Frank Jasper really made his push, I remember Noel up there going, it's Matthew Modine, and then he goes, shoot. He didn't even mention Frank's name. It's like it's the guy who'd shoot. He transcends his own name. But anybody you're looking forward to seeing there that you haven't met?
Well, we've extended an invitation to a couple people to come,
because we know Mario Lopez is going to be in Stillwater. You're not going to get AC Slater's going to be in Stillwater because he's going in as the outstanding American, and I hear he's going to be sticking around to watch the whole tournament.
Yeah, it's every year. I mean, being able to see the likes of Gable and Bruce Baumgartner's obviously coming out with USA Wrestling. It's just so cool to be able to talk to those people, and they're just the nicest people ever. So everybody's there to celebrate the sport. Every year we have a little bit of a celebrity angle. We had the DJ Steve Aoki a number of years ago, Ray Lewis. So there's I know we'll have a couple surprise guests. We've invited Dr. Neil deGrasse Tyson. So
I've been trying to get him on my show for like 7 years. You know that. So somebody put a bug in his ear. Anyway, I'm looking forward to it. I know that I'm glad to be on the mic there with Brian Hazard. I know that Final X and it's an experience. So folks, if you've got a chance, if you can't make it to New York and you got a chance to head on down to Stillwater, I recommend both events. If you can make them both, dude, that's awesome. But Brennan, I appreciate everything you guys are doing at Beat the Streets New York, getting wrestling in the schools, getting them to a group of kids that may never have discovered how great our sport is and what it can do for people, not just on the mat, but off the mat, and then the life lessons it teaches, and everything you guys do at Beat the Streets New York City and all the Beat the Streets chapters, around the country, and the yeoman's work you guys are doing there. So I know it's appreciated from where I sit, and I know the wrestling fans appreciate it, and we're looking forward to seeing everything go down in Hulu Theater on June 8th.